Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Dana Pawar, and I'm an investor, founder of Vera Tempo, where we work with companies from ideation to launch, and advisory board member of the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. I jokingly call myself the P. Diddy of the tech world, as almost all of the companies I worked with have had a name change by way of acquisition or IPO. But jokes apart, I am where I am today thanks to incredible mentors, which is why today's topic is so dear to my heart. And I am so excited to introduce you to our amazing panelists. But before I do that, for those of you who may not know, the NASDAQ Center is a nonprofit dedicated to enabling entrepreneurs from all over the world to realize their maximum potential and growth. The NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center, along with founding partner Mentor Cloud, launched a free mentor matching platform for entrepreneurs called Mentor Makers. With Mentor Makers, you can create your own advisory board to guide and inspire you with in-the-moment mentorship from topic experts and professionals dedicated to providing exceptional mentorship to entrepreneurs across all races, industries, geographies. Together, we are building the greatest exchange of knowledge and expertise in service to entrepreneurs in business today. You can find or become a mentor today by using the link in the chat. Entrepreneurs, as we all know, are the dreamers, the doers, the visionaries who are not just solving the problems our community and world face today, but those that will create a better future for us all. Mentorship truly matters to all entrepreneurs. In fact, their success depends on it. So we will be opening up live Q&A at the end of the event. So please submit your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen anytime during the presentation. And for those who've already sent in questions ahead of time, thank you for doing so. And before we get started, we would love to learn really more about what is important to you, right? The audience right now. During these unique times, we're curious how sentiment is among the entrepreneurs we work with. So essentially, first, we would like to start by taking a quick poll and let us know how you are feeling about your business right now. So I think you can see the questions up on your screen. Would love to hear how you're feeling. Are you feeling fearful, anxious? Are you just barely surviving, or are you optimistic? If it's none of the above or something else, feel free to put it in the chat, but we'll share the results back with you. Aha, I love it. I was hoping it would be optimistic, and over 60% of you feel optimistic, which I love to see. And only 8% are barely surviving, and nobody's fearful. So that makes me insanely happy to see this right now. All right. Our next question for this poll is, what is keeping you up at night? Is it finance? Is it sales? How do I grow my company? Is it marketing, scale, pivot? Is it team, or again, just barely surviving? Again, go ahead and vote, and then we'll share the results back with you. All right, bit of a mixed bag here, which is normal and expected. The number one is sales, which I completely understand. Where would you be without sales? Build it and they will come doesn't really work. The next big one is pivot, which also I can understand given we just are in the middle of a pandemic even now, just barely coming out of it. Scale, followed by marketing, finance, team, and surviving. That's great. I hope we can address some of these at least today through our panel. Which brings me to our amazing, amazing panelists that I'm so excited to introduce you to today. Our first guest today is Claudia Reuter, and she is the CEO and co-founder of a pre-launch high alpha company, speaker, podcaster, and author of Yes, You Can Do This: How Women Start Up, Scale Up, and Build the Life They Want. Claudia Reuter is an experienced entrepreneur and executive and has been recognized by the Boston Business Journal as a woman to watch in science and technology and as a change maker by Hub Week. She currently serves as the CEO of Council, a high alpha studio company, as a member of the board of directors for Lessonly, and as a member of the editorial advisory board for Innovation Leader. She previously served as a GM for Techstars, the senior vice president of digital services and labs for Hutton Mifflin Harcourt, and was the co-founder and CEO of School Chapters, Inc. Thank you so much for being here today, Claudia.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
And I'm so sorry, I'm just going to share this with the participants. Right before this call, I asked Claudia how to pronounce her last name, and yet I kind of goofed up on it. So I apologize for that. It's Claudia Reuter.
No apologies needed.
Our next guest is Ian Hathaway, who is the head of ecosystems at Techstars. He's an investor, advisor, and co-founder of the startup community way, evolving an entrepreneurial ecosystem. Currently, Ian leads the global ecosystems business at Techstars, which works with entrepreneurs, community leaders, and institutions around the world to support their path towards building better ecosystems. Ian is an active startup advisor, mentor, and investor. He is a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution and a board member at the Center for American Entrepreneurship. So welcome, Ian.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
We're excited to have you. And last but not least, we welcome Brad Feld, founder of Foundry Group, venture capitalist, podcaster, and Ian's co-author of The Startup Community Way, Evolving an Entrepreneurial Ecosystem. Brad has been an early stage investor and entrepreneur since 1987. Prior to co-founding the Foundry Group, he co-founded Mobius Venture Capital, and prior to that, founded Intensity Ventures. Brad is also a co-founder of Techstars. And as you can imagine, we are so excited just listening to their backgrounds. So without any further delay, I know everybody wants to just get started with the panel. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to all of our special guests, Carolyn, Ian, and Brad. Okay, so as I said, I know everyone's really excited to get started. So I'm going to ask this first question to the panelists. This question is open to everybody. And again, being Earth Day, this seemed like the right way to kick us off today. So scientific breakthroughs and advanced technological innovations are all things being generated at an all-time high velocity. We see that they're creating opportunities which truly make this time in history remarkable to be in. So today being Earth Day, we wanted to start with this first question, which I hope is fun for everybody to answer. Is entrepreneurship the answer to saving the planet? Who wants to go first? Ian, do you want to go first?
Sure, I will go first. I think ultimately people are the answer. Entrepreneurs are an answer, a very important answer to this, simply because entrepreneurs solve, thorny challenges through innovation, technology. That's what they do. In fact, as a great example of this, just yesterday, both Brad and I received the second dose of the Pfizer vaccine. Less than about a year after this thing set on. It's pretty remarkable that we were able to pull that off. And so, yeah, entrepreneurs are going to drive this to a large degree. I think government policy is actually very important as well. Can send some strong signals, set the right incentives for private actors to follow. So I think governments can be a large leverage point. And in fact, I would say that a lot of the corporate stewardship we've seen around sustainability and environment, I believe has been a response to a lack of good governance, especially in this country. And so I think all of these things matter.
I think you hit it perfectly, right? And just if this last year has taught us anything, I think everything you said hit home really, really hard. So I completely agree. Claudia, do you want to go next?
Sure. I agree with everything Ian just said. I was just going to add, I think one of the really exciting things is seeing how different groups can come together to solve some of these problems. And like, I found it really inspiring in the last few years, seeing, what some of the corporate partners at Techstars have done to support entrepreneurs on certain causes. Like with Stanley Black & Decker, they made an initiative focused on sustainable packaging tech. And, doing a scout out and looking for entrepreneurs, we ended up finding a company that's actually converting crop waste into a new form of bioplastics. And so they're now still a year later working with Stanley, trying to figure out, the company's name is Crast, how they can make this happen and help the environment in the process. So I think really true innovation comes when we bring people together.
Oh, well said. Brad, anything to add there? Oh, Brad, I think you're on mute.
Can you hear me now? A recurring theme, especially comes from the work that Ian and I have done with the Startup Community Way, is the idea of impact from the bottom up versus the top down. And while there are many, top down initiatives around, saving the planet, which I think is the leading phrase that we started with, the individual involvement from the bottom up, especially around innovative and new ways of doing things, it can be profound. And to Claudia's comment, being able to cut across organizations rather than relying on or living within an organization is so incredibly powerful. And an entrepreneurial mindset often is a bottom-up mindset versus a top-down mindset. It's not, I'm waiting for somebody to give me permission or tell me how to do something. It's, I see a thing that I want to change or I want to influence, and I'm going to go figure out how to, create something or change something or influence something. And I just reinforce the importance of that, not as the exclusive way to address the issue, but as a very powerful way that is often overlooked or undervalued.
Could not agree more. And actually, that's a perfect segue into my next question. So I'm going to get right to it. Today is not only Earth Day, right? But it's also National Volunteer Week. And we really, as the center, we want to take this opportunity to thank the thousands of volunteers across the country and those people on this call today who keep many organizations running. They keep the community safe. They provide services that otherwise would not exist, like Brad, you just mentioned, without the bottom up of the volunteer approach. And again, this is a great time to consider volunteering or providing support to those organizations vital to our communities. So, those who are the participants, if you can please fill out the mentor form in the chat and join us in the Mentor Makers movement to support your peers that are in attendance today. That would be amazing. But this is a question to, again, all the panelists. What are some ways each of you like to volunteer your own time? And what are your recommendations for ways in which the audience can actually get involved? Who wants to go first?
I'll start this one off. I'll give an approach, for other people who are interested in volunteering, but also in the context of mentoring, is this notion of being very available to anyone who wants to engage with you. And many things in my world have come from that approach. For a period of time, probably 5 or 6 years, I used to do once a month something I called random days. And for random day, I met with anybody that wanted to meet with me for 15 minutes. And I had an online sign up, and this was back in the sort of 2005 to 2010 timeframe. And, you'd sign up for a 15-minute slot. And a lot of times I did it at a coffee shop. Sometimes I do it at my office. And I'd meet with 10 to 15 people a day. And for that 15 minutes, the person would sit down, with me, and I'd say, look, the next 15 minutes of my life belong to you. Happy to go wherever you want. And, people started to learn that that's what the 15 minutes were about. And some people came prepared and some people didn't. But I had two goals with those 15 minutes. One goal for me was to learn something. So if I learned something from each of the 15-minute meetings, and I learned 10 things in one day, on any dimension, that was additive to me. The other was I wanted to figure out in that 15 minutes, one thing that I could do to help the other person, that I could do that was actionable, not just in the moment with a piece of feedback, but then some action I could take that could be helpful to them. And, there's many things that came from that specific random day activity. One of them was Techstars. And the founding story of Techstars includes David Cohen meeting me for the first time on a random day. So, it can translate into quite substantial outcome. There are many, many things that didn't translate into anything, but I like to believe, again, that I learned something while helping someone. And I think that notion, if you abstract that, I'm not suggesting that people do random days once a month, but if you abstract that notion and think about it in the context of volunteering, it's not a selfless act. You get benefit, both functional and emotional, from helping someone, but you can also use the experience to learn something. And by pairing those two activities, it makes it valuable no matter what it is.
That's amazing. I did not know that's how Techstars came about. So that is such a great story. I did not know that. And I could not agree more. I feel like every time I mentor someone, I learn more from my mentee than what I actually give to my mentee. So I feel sort of guilty sometimes. It's a bit selfish, but I agree with you. Like, I feel like we get more out of this mentor-mentee relationship. It's a two-way street. So 100% there with you. Ian, you want to go next?
Yeah, I was going to say, in addition to learning something, and that's an amazing story. I tell that story often. Obviously, I wasn't there, so but it's a very powerful story about how giving actually gets you something much greater. It's not only about the learning, but I feel very energized. I have a regular day job. I go to meetings. I make decisions and deal with P&Ls just like anyone else. But we also have this thing at Techstars when there's accelerators, we have Mentor Madness, and it's a full day you've got to clear, and you're just meeting with mentors, with startups, founders, 20 minutes for 10 companies, and it's like exhausting, and they're exhausted. And invariably, I've got a busy week, and I'm thinking, oh no, I have that whole day where I can't do all these things that I need to do. And then I start to regret doing that. And then I go to Mentor Madness, and every single time it's the best thing that happened to me that week or even that month, right? It's so energizing. And to your point, I feel like I'm sometimes like, who was actually mentoring who in this conversation? The second thing I'll add, because this is fresh and kind of fun, about how do we volunteer our time. I recently became head coach of the Jumbo Shrimp T-ball team here in Santa Barbara. So it's 4, 5, and 6-year-olds. It is amazing. It's super, super hard. But one of the things that I'm sort of, as I'm processing all of this, it's really aligned with kind of my advice on management and really leadership, which is do, don't say, show, don't tell. Right? The children need me to show them exactly what does dropping your bat mean? What does running to first base mean? And I think that's really important for leadership, because when leaders' actions don't match their words, it creates confusion and discontent. And so the best advice for leadership is just be the thing that you aspire to be and that you want to hold others to. I don't have to remind people in this country that that's what happens. People follow the leaders. And so lessons on management and leadership in volunteering for 4 and 5 and 6-year-olds.
That's amazing. That's brilliant. I can see that in my own life right now. I have 2 12-year-olds, and just, I've been volunteering, teaching them how to build their own little companies in their own ways. And just teaching them has taught me so much, actually. Like, this is what I should be doing in my own life. So yeah, it can come in any form and at any age. So yeah, love it. Claudia, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, first of all, I'm imagining what I was doing in 2005, and I really would have benefited from those random days. But yeah, I think volunteerism, to me, I think something to keep in mind is that, you give what you have, right? And so there's, at different points in your career or your experiences, there's going to be different ways in which you can volunteer and give back. And so, in early days, it might be helping, just do simple things at an event, like hand out flyers, right? And then as you go on in your career, it changes. So I know Ian mentioned Mentor Madness with Techstars, and I'm now heading up a new company, and yet super excited to be able to volunteer at a Mentor Madness next week. So it's a great way to connect with folks and just see how you can help.
Yeah, and I think it looks like Random Days is trending right now on our chat. So
Yeah.
it feels like it's time for you to bring it back. I can see everyone's like resonating with the Random Days, not just the panelists, but the participants as well. So you might just be bringing it back, Brad. I don't know. So Claudia, this next question is for you. You wrote the book, Yes, You Can Do This, that teaches you how to cultivate the confidence to move from idea to creating a company with the cultures and rules that you want at the very beginning, right? From the very beginning. Can you elaborate on some of the ways that you have done this successfully in your career? And we would love to know basically how you developed and shared your vision. And if you could also just touch upon how do you encourage peer support within a community, especially when you're new and very small and no one knows about you to begin with?
Yeah. So I had an opportunity to write a book, as you mentioned last year. And the reason I did so is because I have a pretty non-traditional, non-linear career path. I had actually been working at an investment bank in technology when I had my first child, who's now 18, and stepped away to be a full-time caregiver back in the early 2000s. And so my entry point back into the quote world of work was actually through entrepreneurship. I started a SaaS company, kind of realizing like, wow, I was in this world where I didn't have the tools that I wanted at that point, and just set out to build something. And it created an enormous number of opportunities for me over time. Post acquisition, and then ultimately, created an opportunity to come into the world of Techstars and be the person I wished I'd had access to when I didn't know about Random Days in 2005. But building, to me, the idea of trying to think about how to cultivate confidence really stems from goal setting and then achieving those goals. And every time you set a goal and you achieve it, you build your confidence. And so I think sometimes people get stuck on trying to think about, well, how do I just get to the next step? And I try to always think about, well, where is it that you really want to go? And start there and then work your way back to today. And you'll build your confidence if you can start to see that. Just like if you were taking a road trip from New York to Boston, you might hit traffic, you might hit a wrong turn, but you have the confidence to know you'll figure it out. And I think that's the mindset that helps you if you're building a company. It's just realizing there are definitely going to be things that don't go the way you think they're going to go. But if you can just keep saying, but I'm going to get there, may not be the same time frame I thought, but I will get there, you'll figure it out.
Yeah, no, the road trip is a great analogy. Thanks so much for that. The next question is for you, Brad. And again, keeping with the book theme, your book, The Startup Community Way, Evolving an Entrepreneurial Ecosystem, explores what makes startup communities thrive and how to actually improve collaboration in these rapidly evolving, complex environments. Can you describe some examples from the book that have can you first describe some examples from your book? And more importantly, have your insights changed since writing that book?
Well, there's two books. There's a book I wrote in 2012, which is Startup Communities. And then there's a book that Ian and I wrote, which came out in 2020 called The Startup Community Way, which is a sequel. I also came out with a second edition of Startup Communities in 2020. So sort of refreshed it with some notions. I think a fundamental thing that is key to the way I think about building and developing startup communities is that they have one goal. And that one goal is to help entrepreneurs succeed. And that's it. And if you can anchor on that one goal, which is to help entrepreneurs succeed, then you have the ability to start to have your startup community grow and develop. Ian and I distinguish in the new book, between a startup community and an entrepreneurial ecosystem. And the important thing here is that an entrepreneurial ecosystem often has many actors in it, beyond just the entrepreneurs. And each actor has other goals other than just helping entrepreneurs succeed. And so by creating this startup community at the nucleus and focusing all the actors in the entrepreneurial ecosystem on that goal, and when they engage with entrepreneurs, you can, as one of those actors, if you can answer the question affirmatively, is what I'm doing helping entrepreneurs succeed, then you're adding to and helping the startup community grow and develop. And I'll give a very simple example that comes up over and over again. I've spoken to many people around the world who work for city, state, or national governments in a role or a department that's called economic development. And there's always an economic development person in local government, state government. There's usually an organization. In the state of Colorado, it's called Office of Economic Development, International Trade. And when you talk to the person or people in that and say, what are your 5 priorities? What are the 5 most important things that you need to do? One of those 5 priorities, invariably, 100% of the time, is create more jobs. 100% of the time, one of their 5 priorities. Often their top priority. If you go to an entrepreneur and say, hey, Claudia, I'm here to help you create more jobs. Claudia sort of looks at me and rolls her eyes or sort of takes a deep breath before she responds. And she says, look, I don't need help creating more jobs. That's what I do. That's the outcome of my entrepreneurial activity. Now, there's a bunch of things you can help me with: getting the right people, training them, recruiting them, make it easier for them to show up here, having lots of sort of workforce reentry programs so the talent pool is bigger. I've got a long list of these things that you could help with that help me then create more jobs, which of course accomplishes your goal. But if your goal is create more jobs and that's what you're focused on, and you show up and say, how do I help you create more jobs? That's not going to go anywhere. And this is a really important part of the whole dynamic around startup communities. In the new book, Ian and I talk probably about a dozen things like this very specifically. And it's one of the things that's so interesting to notice over time, like to go back to your question of what's changed for me in a decade since I wrote the first book. A couple of things I got wrong in that first book. I punted on government. I just didn't really put much effort into understanding how government can help. And I kind of said government's job is to do no harm. There are actually some very productive things that government can do. And so sort of we go deeper into that. I also had this construct in the first book of leaders and feeders. And I said, the entrepreneurs have to be leaders. Everyone else is a feeder. But I didn't give voice to all of the people who are not entrepreneurs or not founders, but who play leadership roles in the startup community, many of them who work for feeders. And so I shifted this notion that the organizations were feeders, but there could be individuals that play a leadership role in those organizations. And we called them, Ian and I call them instigators. So sort of this notion that what you're trying to do is, if you go back to the first question, you're just trying to create this bottom-up phenomena of engagement rather than this top-down organization called a startup community. And innovation emerges from the complexity and the chaos that exists between all of the interesting collisions.
Yeah, no, that was very, very, very well put. And I love how you tied it all back to our first question. I think that was so enlightening. And I'd love to see 10 years from now if you think very differently again. But this has been super helpful. Ian, the next one is for you. Since you co-wrote the book, The Startup Community Way with Brad, do you have anything else you want to add that to what Brad just shared with us?
Yeah, for sure. I think maybe I'll just pick up with the first thing he described, which is putting the entrepreneurs first, and then the last thing, which is I think the word was collisions, but it's actually, I guess we're talking about collaborations. And I think that's what it's really about. We have a tendency to overcomplicate or make things overly complex. That's human nature. We get in our own way all the time. But this is actually really simple. I think it comes down to two things. It's putting the entrepreneur first and understanding what this is all about. Much like entrepreneurs need to obsess about their customers, thinking entrepreneurs are always thinking about, well, I have an idea of what this market might need, and the market is telling you something else, right? And it's that constant iteration, and they have to, or they don't survive. Large companies have the business of sort of sustaining on the past deeds of the previous entrepreneurs who figured that out, right? And so if you're in economic development or a university entrepreneurship program or an investor, right, or an accelerator program manager, whatever it is, as much as possible, right? We all have our own agendas. We have our own organizations to run and sustain, but as much as possible, try to focus on what's best for the entrepreneurs, because when they succeed, you will also succeed. The second thing is about, collaboration. That's what we're talking about, a community, right? We're talking about human relationships around helping entrepreneurs succeed. The best way to do that is this concept that that Brad has created and iterated on with others, called Give First, which is helping, just showing up and helping people. It's woven through this entire conversation, but it's helping people without the expectation of receiving something immediately in return, right? You expect to get something out of it, but you don't know from who and what form and when. I like to think of it as just transcending a transactional mindset, being extremely positive sum, wanting others around you to be successful, knowing that if I'm part of this community or this system or whatever you want to call it, that's going to feed me too. And it's just too mentally exhausting to try to keep that ledger, right? So just be helpful where you can. Right. And then the final thing, I guess, which is kind of underpinning all of that, is just sort of an action item, is just to engage. Oftentimes people in those institutions that want to be supportive, they don't get out of their office enough, right? If you just show up, if you talk to, depending on the size of your city, if you talk to a few dozen entrepreneurs, especially those who have had some success, you will know pretty quickly what the issues are, right? I mean, there's always going to be variations on that, but in general, the same things will keep cropping up. So you'll have built some relationships. You'll hopefully have helped some people. You'll be more relevant. You'll know what's going on. And then you'll have these people that you might see a need to connect them up and then let them carry on and help each other. And so, there's a whole giant book about that. We could go on, but I think maybe I'll stop there as like kind of what the big picture is of this work.
That's amazing. And speaking of collaboration, I see Brad's responding collaboratively to all the amazing comments and questions. So thank you, Brad, for doing that in parallel. I know we're running out of time. We had so many amazing questions, and we also have a lot of great questions from the audience that I want to be able to get to. So I'm going to ask you really quickly, Brad, just to switch gears a little bit, but what are some of the ways that our audience can cultivate diversity, right? It's top of mind for all of us. We talk about it all the time. But what are some actionable ways that they can cultivate diversity and inclusion in startup communities, right? By having the confidence to move from ideation to implementation.
I think there's, in 2021 now, there's some really good examples where even a couple of years ago, I don't think there were particularly good examples, like people would make assertions versus show examples. And so I'm going to use an example rather than make an assertion about how to do it. There's an organization called Entrepreneurship for All. It's e4all.org. It started in Massachusetts. It's expanded to Colorado. A group of us underwrote their expansion to Longmont. And it's an organization that provides mentorship through a part-time accelerator-like program to entrepreneurs who are not traditional entrepreneurs. And they're in towns that are adjacent to, but not part of, wealthy, successful entrepreneurial towns. So in Massachusetts, it's not a program that's in Boston or Cambridge. It's a program that's in Waverly, or a program that's in Revere, or a program that's in Lowell. So, these communities that are typically sort of non-white, immigrant heavy, more diverse in terms of the sort of local economy. And the example, the magic, is that the mentors are from the robust and experienced startup communities, Boston, Cambridge, but they go to the activity in Lowell. They go to that entrepreneur. I can use Colorado as an example. I'm in Boulder, which is a very white and wealthy community. It's moderately self-aware of its privilege. I would say it's one of the things that is somewhat of a challenge in Boulder as a very progressive town, is this own sort of self-awareness of what the dynamics around privilege are. Longmont, which is the adjacent town, is what you would consider to be a pretty typical Colorado or Western US smallish town, a couple 100,000 people. The single mother of two who's Hispanic that is trying to start a new business while working a full-time job, her ability to drive 30 minutes to Boulder to go to an event in the evening and stay at the event and then drive home for 30 minutes is non-existent. She just doesn't have the ability to do it. And even if she did, she'd show up at the event and people in Boulder would say, "Oh, awesome, welcome." But she wouldn't feel like anybody else in the event. She wouldn't identify with anybody. They're not her natural peers. And so people would be, they would be trying to be inclusive, but by having her have to go to them. And the real shift is to turn it around and to have the entrepreneurs go to those communities. And there's a really subtle but magical thing that starts to happen, is that you want to link the networks bi-directionally. So if you're really being serious about inclusivity, it's not that you want to include that person in your network. It's that you also want to get involved in their network. And you want to link these networks together. And once those things, and that requires investment on the part of the person going to the other person. And it's why it's so powerful, is if I'm a successful entrepreneur in Boulder, I don't have time to do that. That's such utter nonsense relative to the concept of requiring that other person who doesn't have the resources you have to come to you. So just changing that dynamic. And I'll just end with my partner at Foundry Group, Seth Levine, has a book coming out called The New Builders that comes out in 2 weeks. And he's written a book that talks to this problem in the US and the phenomena of this across the US. And I'll dig up while somebody else is talking the link to it. And it's amazing to read the stories and the thesis of it and recognize just the number of entrepreneurs in our country who are traditional entrepreneurial networks, startup communities, discussion around entrepreneurship, just bypasses, and how important it is for us to incorporate all of that into the entrepreneurial motion.
I love it. I love it. Oh my God. I'm going to steal Ian's word here. I feel so energized after listening to all of this. So thank you. We're majorly over time. So I'm going to just ask one really last question for everyone. Maybe really, really quickly, super quick for everybody on the panel. What is one takeaway you would like to leave the audience with today? And we'll quickly get to the audience's questions because there's a lot coming in.
Well, I'd love to jump on and just support of what Brad was just talking about and the way in which we think about inclusion and what that really looks like. I mean, I remember being a younger mom with really little kids and thinking about, okay, I want to go to this event to talk about my company, but I'm going to have to get a babysitter. I'm going to have to get on a train and go somewhere for 2 hours. And so the idea that, while it's kind to invite someone into your group, or it's kind to say, hey, it's okay if you don't make that meeting, inclusion is about thinking about the circumstances that people are in and how you can adjust to support them. So I'm just really glad and excited that that got brought up.
Great.
Just one thing. Well, hopefully they got more than one thing. But I guess I would just say this. Anyone, just to stick with this theme, is that anyone can be a mentor, right? As long as you're not harmful to people, right? You have a desire to help others, right? You know how to ask questions and listen rather than direct people. Anyone can do it, right? So my advice is actually you're probably already doing it. And so that's the action item, is to see yourself as a mentor. It's not just a senior junior kind of one up one down thing. Peer mentoring is actually, I think, one of the most powerful things. I think mentoring is a lot like coaching. It's less like advising. It's a lot more like coaching, right? Listening, asking good questions, and encouraging them, to move forward.
That's great. Brad, any last takeaway before we go to the questions?
No, let's just do questions.
Perfect. So we have a lot. We have a few that were sent ahead of time, few that are coming in. So I'm going to start with Aneri's question, which is, any advice for building mentee programs for a venture studio? The difference would be mentoring potential founders versus founders.
I didn't catch the phrase at the beginning.
Sure. Yeah. So the question is, any advice for building mentee programs for
mentee programs? That's what I didn't catch. Well, I can answer that. We're investors. We Foundry are investors in 2 venture studios, and Claudia obviously is running a company that came out of one of those, which is High Alpha. The other one is Pioneer Square Labs. And I think that what both of them do extremely well as part of their business is they have, dedicated people on their team in addition to the senior leaders who are constantly doing programmatic activity for people who are interested in getting involved in startups beyond just people who want to be founders. And they're able to then leverage the founders of the companies that they've spun out as mentors for that. And in that, they start to build a rhythm between mentors and mentees. And it's something you said at the very beginning, like your comment that as a mentor, you learn a lot from mentees. The best mentor-mentee relationships are peer relationships, not one up, one down relationships. Ian just said this, but I'll reinforce it. My most impactful mentor who passed away recently is a guy named Len Fassler. He bought my first company, and Len and I went on to do a number of companies together. And the amount that I learned about business from Len was extraordinary, but I also learned about how to treat people, and I learned about life. And if you asked Len, a couple of years ago, hey, Len, did you learn more from Brad, or did Brad learn more from you? Len would say the inverse. He would say, the amount I learned from Brad was incredible, in a whole bunch of areas that I didn't know anything about. And, if you had us both sitting together, we'd say, no, we learned so much from each other, even though when our relationship started, and he's 30 years old, was 30 years older than me, or even a little bit older than that. When our relationship started, he was definitely the mentor and I was definitely the mentee. So letting that evolve, you don't have to wait 10 years, by the way, to get to a peer relationship. That can happen out of the gate.
That's great. No, thank you. The next question is from Cyrus. He asks, for a mission-focused org who does not want to sell, but still scale and have massive impact, any special considerations to keep in mind to grow? Anybody wants to take that? Ian, Claudia, Brad?
I have a very quick, short reaction, which is what I say to every, and I know you said mission-driven versus nonprofit, but I say this to every nonprofit that I get involved in. Growth should not be your goal. Growth is an outcome of you accomplishing your mission. And so maybe in this case, again, I don't know enough about the business and the context, but I would say, in a venture-backed business, growth is such an important part of the driver of what the business does. If you're a mission-driven organization, thinking about, is the behavior and what you're doing accomplishing the mission, and does that need growth? And sometimes the answer is yes, but not always.
Very, very well said. Anyone else want to add to that before we get to the next one?
Impossible. That was it.
one word answer. I love it.
Great
Yeah.
answer.
I was just going to add on too to what Brad and Ian were both saying about coaching and the importance of peer collaboration and peer support. It's actually, these things all tied together, and that's one of the aspects of what we're working on at the new company coming out of the studio is how do we facilitate the interactions between people who are at similar stages and really set ways for them to grow. So it's exciting.
That's great. So this question is from an anonymous attendee, which is, other than Techstars or communities that you have created, which ones do you admire or think have done well in terms of helping entrepreneurs? Any thoughts there?
I mean, here in New England, there's a ton of exciting things going on to support, founders at different stages. I mean, in Hartford, Sabrina Tucker Barrett does a ton of work with her nonprofit supporting women getting into technology, including entrepreneurs. And here in Boston, there's a number of groups ranging from Venture Cafe to Mass Ventures, all designed to support the ecosystem. All these things tied together. So,
this is slightly a plug for Techstars, but in Western New York, Buffalo, Rochester, we had our first ecosystem development pilot there. And these two amazing individuals leading the work, Jack Greco and Clark Dever, colleagues, friends, mentors, spiritual guides, whatever, they just literally met with like 1,000 entrepreneurs over an 18-month period and did everything they could to help them. They then got that flywheel spinning, aggregated those people, and have created something called the Western New York Startup Community. It really accelerated there were a lot of entrepreneurs doing things in isolation. That region is generally collaborative, right? If you know anything about that region, and they were sort of the spark that kind of brought all this together. I think that Slack channel has 600 active users a month, right, in Buffalo, New York, and a lot of other amazing things are happening. But that's an example of, I guess, where a company like Techstars was involved, but really it's this self-sustaining startup community that is super vibrant, and people are helping each other and introducing each other to their, to investors, customers, and all sorts of other things. So, yeah. Exciting things happening there.
I know I'm playing to the host here, but let's mention NASDAQ Center and Mentor Makers. There is now wonderfully many organizations around the world that have adopted a lot of the different ideas around startup communities, around mentorship. Many of the things that have come out of the work that we've done at Techstars. When we started Techstars, by the way, our approach was an open source like approach. We viewed this phenomenon not as one where like we have to own and control it, but of something that we really wanted. We thought that we could build something that had immense value, both to the founders of Techstars and the creators and the shareholders in Techstars, but to all the entrepreneurs. But we didn't view it as a proprietary phenomenon. We viewed it as a phenomenon we were trying to enable and engage globally, with really the goal of democratizing entrepreneurship around the world. And while there's still lots and lots to do to get to the place that might be the ideal state, and we probably never get to the ideal state, it's pretty amazing to look at the difference between today and 2005 in terms of the dynamics of entrepreneurship globally. And it's very, very rewarding to see so many people in so many places that are doing amazing things.
I could not agree more. And thank you for mentioning the NASDAQ Center. I've been, on the advisory board since the very beginning, and also part of this committee called the Social Impact Committee that measures, right, what the outcomes are and the impact of these mentorship programs along with others. And it's just mind-boggling to see where we've come and how far we've come in just 4 years alone. So I completely agree with you. Sorry, Ian, did you want to add something before I go to the next question? Cool. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit. This is always on top of mind for every entrepreneur, so no surprises here with this question. But this question is from Dion. Any fundraising advice for pre-revenue bootstrapped startups that need capital to get to the next phase? Anyone want to take that one? Fundraising advice for pre-revenue bootstrapped startups?
two things. One, accept that it's always hard to raise money, even if you read every day about all these companies that have raised tons of money. So just know it's hard and requires a lot of work. And the second is, especially at the very early stages, raise the least amount of money that you need to get to the next level. So instead of viewing funding as a goal, view funding as a resource. And you really have control over the definition of how much you need and what the next level is. And a mistake so many early entrepreneurs make is that they try to raise too much money too early from the wrong people, and as a result, don't succeed. And so just be very, very thoughtful. And if your answer is, well, I don't, this is my first company, I don't know who I should be raising from. There's an enormous amount of content now available that even, 5 or 10 years ago wasn't, both on the web and then through lots and lots of different resources, whether they're books or online programs, or networks, a la mentors, and, just ask a bunch of people and sort of use that to zone in sort of what you need and how you need to go after it.
Oh, that's great. I'm going to jump to a question that was sent ahead of time because I find it really interesting. This question is there shame in admitting you need a mentor to start your business? And how do I find a mentor who appreciates the context of a solo, side hustling Black parentpreneur? Anybody want to take that?
I mean, I would just say at a high level, no, there is no shame, right? We all need mentors, right? Everyone on this panel, everyone in this room needs mentors, right? I think, look, one of the best ways to build trusting relationships is to be vulnerable, right? It actually also allows people to help us with what we actually need. I know that for sure, the times in my life when I have actually not been able to get the help I needed, it's because I wasn't being vulnerable enough and articulating what the problem was. I was worried about what the other person might think. Maybe I would look stupid. By the way, I look stupid on a daily basis. If my wife were back from picking up the kids, she would tell you that for sure. So, but yeah, so we're sort of projecting on what the other person's view or what that will be, but all we're really doing is slowing ourselves down. So no one is vulnerable. No one is above needing mentorship. You just heard Brad tell this story about Len, who was well accomplished. I like to think, Brad is one of my, greatest mentors, but I also like to think that I mentor him as well. And that's absolutely the case. Same with Claudia. And so, yeah, I'm kind of just going on, but I just want to underscore this 8 million times. Everyone needs a mentor. Everyone can be a mentor.
I tossed a couple of things up in chat. James Oliver, an entrepreneur who is a Black parent of 2 kids that he calls the Twinados because they're twins. Started one of his dream was one of his dream was to create a foundation. He created the Parentpreneur Foundation. It's for Black parents who are entrepreneurs. It's got a very vibrant community. And, I would say, just to sort of close the loop on this one, I think that there should be no shame associated with it. It's quite the opposite. I think it's one of those things where we all can learn from others, and mentors help all of us, no matter how successful we are. And, I'm constantly finding and developing new mentor relationships. And, I'll sort of go to that line that I said earlier, the peer relationship is very powerful. Ian might say I'm a mentor of his, but we're peers. I mean, I learn from Ian as much as he learns from me. And some of the things that I've learned from Ian are really very helpful to me. And as you get to know each other, you start to learn how to help each other even more. So I just encourage engagement. And I think what James has done is spectacular. So for the person asking the question, I'd encourage that community that he's created.
And I would just say, here I am starting another company. I spent the first 60 days, building and in parallel calling people I trust to ask for their opinions and ask for advice and get their feedback. Because I know the more that I do talk to mentors, the quicker I'm going to move. So there's no shame at all.
No, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we're all out of time for questions. But speaking of mentorship, I just want to leave the audience with, more events that are coming up around mentorship specifically. So we would love for you to join us in our next Mentor Makers experiences, which include a Mentor Makers workshop, which is titled How to Build Value Through Mentorship with AARP and SCORE, which is next Wednesday, April 28th. And you can also get signed up directly to the platform and ask any questions you might have with onboarding. We also have another event called Mentor Makers Book Club, 2 Beats Ahead on Thursday, May 6th. And then another event, Mentor Makers Live Military Appreciation Month celebration with the US Air Force and VetSynTech on Thursday, May 20th. You can get all this information on the NASDAQ Center's website, but I just wanted to leave that out there. And with that, Laurel, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about the survey. So basically, we want to hear from all of you. So please take a moment to complete the survey that's in your chat window. And we're totally up for time. I wish we had another hour. This was such an amazing panel. Like I learned so much. And thank you so much again for taking the time, Ian, Brad, and Claudia, to speak to the community or with the community, share your insights, and just this was a phenomenal panel. So on behalf of the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center and everyone in attendance today, we sincerely thank you for your time and for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. That was fun.
Oh, and I know, Brooke, you wanted to share a video, right?